Under the fading sun, a tired woman walked slowly down a dusty road. Her feet were sore, her clothes torn, and her heart heavy. Her name was Nayeli, once proud and strong among her people. But time had taken everything from her: her home, her family, and her hope. She had not eaten properly in days. The wind blew dry sand across her face as she whispered to herself, "Just a little farther." Her voice was faint, but she kept walking because stopping meant giving up. And she still had a little strength left to fight. When she reached the edge of a small town, she saw a wide-open land that stretched toward the horizon. It was a ranch, quiet and peaceful, surrounded by fences and old trees. Smoke rose gently from the chimney of a small wooden house. She could hear horses moving inside the barn and the sound of a dog barking in the distance. For a moment, she just stood there, afraid to step forward. She had faced rejection too many times, but the evening was getting colder, and she needed shelter. She took a slow breath and walked through the gate. A man was working near the barn. His shirt was rolled up, showing a strong arm marked with a deep scar that ran across his skin like a story never told. His name was Thomas Garrison, a rancher who lived alone since tragedy had taken away his family. The townspeople called him the Scarred Rancher. His face was rough and quiet, but his eyes carried kindness hidden beneath the pain. When he saw the woman at the gate, he stopped stacking hay and wiped his hands on his trousers. "Evenin', ma'am," he said in a calm voice. "You lost?" Nayeli looked down. Her voice was weak. "No, sir. I need a place to rest. I can work for food if you'll let me." Thomas looked at her for a long moment. Her thin frame and trembling hands told him she had gone hungry for days. She didn't look like someone who meant harm. Finally, he nodded. "You can stay in the shed tonight. There's hay and a blanket. Tomorrow, if you're still here, we'll see what work there is." Tears filled her eyes, but she held them back. "Thank you, sir. I'll earn it. I promise." That night, she lay on the hay under the soft glow of the lantern light. The shed smelled of horses and old wood, but to her it was heaven compared to the cold ground she had known. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks. Had traded her pride for shelter, but for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. At sunrise, she woke before the rancher. The air was cool and fresh. She fetched water from the well, swept the barn, and even fed the horses. Thomas came out later and stopped when he saw her working. He said nothing, but a faint smile crossed his face. She had not waited to be told what to do. That morning, he shared a simple breakfast with her bread, beans, and coffee. She ate slowly, her eyes lowered. "You can stay a while," he said finally. "If you keep working like this, there'll always be a plate for you here." She nodded quietly, grateful but still unsure if she truly belonged. Days turned into weeks. Nayeli worked hard and spoke little. She cooked, cleaned, and cared for the animals. Sometimes she hummed old songs under her breath while hanging. Clothes too dry, and Thomas would pause to listen from a distance. The sound of her voice filled the empty ranch with a strange warmth he had not felt in years. He had once been a husband and father, but a fire had taken everything he loved. The scars on his body were a reminder of what he couldn't save. For years he had lived in silence, speaking only to his animals. But now there was another voice on the land, and it eased the loneliness he had buried deep inside. One evening, Nayeli brought him coffee as he sat on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and red. "You don't talk much," he said, smiling slightly. She smiled back faintly. "Talking doesn't fill empty stomachs," she said softly. "Work does." He nodded. "That's true. You've got a good spirit, Miss Nayeli. Just try to survive," she answered. He looked at her for a long moment. "You're doing more than surviving." She didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her with such quiet respect before. She lowered her eyes, feeling warmth rise in her chest. Over the next few weeks, a silent friendship grew between them. He began to tell her small stories about his horses, the weather, and the land. She began to laugh sometimes, though softly, as if afraid her laughter would break the peace she had found. The ranch, once filled with silence, now had life again. But not everyone in town liked what they saw. Some of the men who worked nearby began whispering. "The rancher's gone soft," they said. "He's keeping that woman there like she belongs." Their words reached Naheli's ears. Shame and fear crept into her heart. She thought about leaving quietly one night. But when she started packing her small bundle, Thomas appeared at the door. "Were you going?" he asked quietly. "I heard what they said," she replied. "I don't want to bring you trouble." He stepped closer. "Let them talk. You don't know what they're talking about. You've earned your place here." His voice was firm and his eyes kind. "This is your home now if you want it to be." Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them quickly. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, she sat outside under the stars. She had been unwanted in many places, but here, a scarred man had given her kindness without asking for anything in return. For the first time, she wondered if God had led her here for a reason. One day, a storm rolled over the plains. The sky turned dark and thunder shook the earth. Thomas ran to secure the animals while Nayeli followed him, her hair whipping in the wind. A frightened horse broke free, and she rushed to help. Poured down, soaking them both, but they worked together until the gates were locked. When it was finally over, they stood breathing hard in the rain. Thomas looked at her and said gently, "You didn't have to help. You could have stayed safe inside." She smiled faintly. "You didn't stay safe either." For a moment, they stood close, rain falling softly between them. His hand rose, almost without thought, and brushed the wet hair from her face. Her heart beat fast, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in years being cared for. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the way he had looked at her, not with pity, but with understanding. She thought about the life she had lost, the pride she had buried, and the peace she had found on this quiet ranch. Maybe she didn't need to keep running anymore. Maybe her heart had finally found a place to rest. In the days that followed, Thomas seemed lighter too. He began to talk more about his past, the fire, his scars, his grief. She listened, her heart aching for him. "Pain changes us," she said one evening. "But sometimes it brings two broken hearts to the same place." He looked at her then, his eyes full of warmth. "You make this place feel alive again," he said quietly. She smiled softly. "And you make it feel safe." The ranch that had once been silent was now full of gentle laughter and quiet peace. The wind no longer felt lonely. The two people who had lost everything had found something neither expected: comfort, kindness, and a quiet love that grew stronger each day. But just as they began to believe in this new life, the world outside would soon come knocking. One stranger's visit would test their bond, and the past both of them had tried to forget would rise again, threatening to take away the peace they had found. Yet for that moment, under the wide sky of the Wild West, they had each other, and that was enough. The next morning came with clear skies after the long storm. The land smelled fresh, and the ground sparkled with drops of rain. Nayeli stood outside, watching the sunlight touch the wet grass. She felt something peaceful inside her, as if the storm had washed away more than just dirt. Thomas stepped out of the barn, his hat low on his brow and his boots muddy, but his eyes warm when he saw her. For a moment, they just looked at each other, both feeling something they didn't dare say out loud. He smiled quietly. "The land needed that rain," he said. She smiled back. So did we. Life on the ranch went on as before, but it felt lighter now. Nayeli cooked, cared for the animals, and worked beside Thomas in the fields. Sometimes they spoke little, and sometimes they shared small stories of their pasts. He taught her how to ride a horse. She taught him old songs from her childhood. The nights grew longer, but the house no longer felt lonely. There was laughter in it again, though soft and shy. But peace never stays untouched for long. One afternoon, a rider appeared on the dirt road leading to the ranch. Nayeli saw the dust trail first and felt a strange unease. The man on the horse wore a town sheriff's badge and carried a folded paper in his coat. He stopped at the gate and called out, "Mr. Garrison." Thomas walked out, wiping his hands on a rag. "That's me," he said. The sheriff nodded, then looked at Nayeli with a questioning eye. "We've been looking for that woman. Folks in town said she's been living here." Nayeli froze. Her hands trembled as she stepped back. "I've done nothing wrong," she said quickly. "I only came here to work." The sheriff raised his hand calmly. "No one said you did, ma'am." "But there's someone asking about you. A ranch owner from across the state. Says you left his property months ago without a word." Thomas's expression hardened slightly. "She doesn't belong to anyone," he said firmly. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "I ain't saying she does, Mr. Garrison. Just doing my duty." "The man says she owes him work wages from a contract." Naomi's face turned pale. She had once worked for a wealthy rancher who had treated her poorly, shouting, overworking her, never paying her fare. She had run away in the night after he hit one of her friends for speaking out. "I don't owe him anything," she said, her voice shaking. "He took my labor, my pride, and gave me hunger in return." Thomas looked at the sheriff. "Then there's no debt worth speaking of here." The sheriff sighed. "I'll tell him she's not coming back, but he might not let it go easy. You best be ready for that." When the sheriff left, Naomi sat on the porch steps, staring at the horizon. She felt shame and fear even though she had done nothing wrong. "I didn't want to bring you trouble," she whispered. Thomas sat beside her. "You didn't. Trouble finds everyone sometime. But I won't let anyone take away what you've built here." She looked at him, her eyes filling with tears she didn't want to show. "Why do you care so much?" He turned his scarred face toward the sunset. "Because I know what it's like to have everything taken from you. I know what it feels like to lose your place in the world. And I won't let that happen to you again." That night, Naomi lay awake, listening to the soft creak of the house. She thought about the man who had once treated her like she was less than human, and about the man who now treated her with respect. She realized then that kindness could heal wounds pride never could. Days passed. Rumors spread that the man from her past was coming. The workers in town talked, and Thomas heard that he planned to ride over with men to claim what he thought was his. When Thomas told Naomi, her face went pale again. "He'll lie," she said. "He'll say anything to take me back." Thomas reached out and took her hand gently. "You're not his. You re-free, and you're not alone anymore." She wanted to believe him, and in her heart she did. But fear still lived deep inside her. The night before the man was expected, she packed her small things: a shawl, a few clothes, a piece of bread. When Thomas found her near the door, he looked hurt. "You're running again," he said quietly. Her eyes were full of tears. "I can't be the reason you lose everything. You've been kind to me. If I stay, they'll ruin your name." He shook his head slowly. "I lost my name a long time ago. What I can't lose again is someone who brings life back into this place." His voice broke a little. "Don't go, Naomi. Not like this." She hesitated, looking at him. His face, once so guarded, now showed the truth his heart had been hiding. She dropped her bag and stepped forward. "Then I'll stay," she whispered. The next day, as the sun rose, the man arrived with 2 other riders. He was tall, well-dressed, and proud, with a sneer on his lips. "You've been hiding my worker," he said loudly. "She belongs on my land." Thomas stood firm. "She's no one's property. She works here by choice." The man laughed harshly. "She's Apache. She don't have rights like you and me." Naomi flinched, but Thomas's eyes turned hard as steel. "You speak one more word like that, and you'll leave this land on your back," he said quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried strength. The men behind the rancher shifted uneasily. They could see he wasn't bluffing. The man tried to argue, but Thomas stood between him and Naomi like a wall. "You're done here," Thomas said firmly. "Now get off my land." For a moment it looked like there might be a fight. The stranger finally turned his horse and rode away, his pride hurt, but his courage gone. Naomi stood in silence, her heart pounding. When the dust settled, she walked toward Thomas. "You didn't have to stand up for me," she said softly. "Yes, I did," he answered. "Because you're part of this home, and because no one should live in fear." She looked at him with tears shining in her eyes. Slowly, she stepped closer. "No one ever protected me before," she whispered. "Until you—" He smiled gently. "Maybe we both needed saving." That evening, they worked side by side, fixing the fence and calming the animals. The sky turned golden again, and everything felt peaceful. Nayeli looked around and realized that this place, the ranch, the land, the quiet man beside her, was no longer just shelter. It was home. Over the next months, life grew steady again. The seasons changed, and the ranch flourished. The neighbors who once whispered behind their backs now brought gifts and shared meals, seeing the goodness in their bond. Thomas's scar no longer seemed like a mark of pain. It was a sign of survival. Nahel's once lost pride returned, but it was no longer cold or distant. It was gentle, humble, and full of love. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Thomas came to her with something small in his hand, a simple silver ring that had belonged to his late wife. "This isn't about the past," he said softly. "It's about what's ahead. I can't offer riches, but I can promise peace and respect. Will you stay with me? Not as someone needing shelter, but as my heart's equal?" Nayeli's breath caught. Her eyes filled with tears, but her smile was brighter than the sunset behind her. "I stayed the day you told me I was free," she said gently, "and I'll never leave again." The wind blew softly through the fields as he placed the ring on her finger. For a moment, the world was still. The scarred rancher and the woman who once traded her pride for shelter stood hand in hand, their pasts behind them and a quiet, unbreakable love before them. From that day on, the ranch was never silent again. There was laughter, the sound of horses, and the warmth of two souls who had found healing in each other. And though life on the frontier was hard, they faced it together, proof that sometimes love grows not from wealth or beauty, but from kindness shared between two broken hearts that finally found home.